Welcome, everybody. This is a pilot episode for our podcast.
What's the name of the podcast?
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about what?
Let's talk about it.
Sex.
We're talking about sex.
We're going to talk about sex.
Not just sex, but specifically, we're gearing this resource toward youth, adolescents, probably high school age students that have developmental disabilities, intellectual disabilities, autism, ADHD, psychiatric disabilities, just in general. If you're neurodivergent,
cognitive disabilities, yeah.
If you're neurodivergent, which means that your brain is different than what our society thinks is normal, then this podcast is for you, because they don't teach us sex very well, do they?
They really don't.
I don't mean to laugh, but I mean
sex is kind of funny sometimes.
We're coping.
And I think that's actually a really important thing that people should learn about sex, is it's okay to laugh.
Yeah.
In and around the subject, because if you're too serious, that's an interesting, but I can just say, some moments in my life have been a lot calmer because I giggled.
Yeah.
And more fun. I'm Constance. I'm a graduate student in gonna become an LPCC, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
My master's degree in counseling and rehabilitation.
Mm-hmm. My name is Christine Figueroa. I'm also studying rehabilitation and counseling with Constance. And
my name's Monica, and I'm in the school-based family counseling program.
So we all want to help people. And I think with our combined knowledge, you learning about helping people in schools, and we're learning about disability, we're starting this conversation because we think that we have some lived experience to offer. We have some research that we're going to look at and share with you guys, and also some laws.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of like a crash course about sex ed and some, I think, things that you may need to know just to start learning about sex. There's
start
just
the
so
conversation.
Much. Yeah, that's kind of what we're here for. Let's literally talk about it.
Let's talk about it.
We'll talk about this later, but and we did mention this is also for parents. I didn't get a sex talk with my parents.
Caregivers, teachers, professionals.
Yeah, for different people.
Anyone who's interested.
Anyone who's interested, anyone who's involved with youth that has a disability. But the reason why I'm saying this I'm saying this because we're hoping that this starts a conversation about sex. We're not going to cover everything because that's impossible, but just a couple of things we think are really important for now. Mm-hmm. And you guys can continue the conversation.
Communication is key. So, there's no federally mandated law that requires that any student get sex education. So that means that what kind of material you're taught in school about your reproductive health, sex, your gender, the possibility of pregnancy and STDs and all that kind of stuff, it's left up to the states, and it's left up, and it's often different it is different state to state, and it's also different city to city and county to county and school to school sometimes, especially in how it's physically done.
Yeah, and if you want to learn more about what that looks like for each state, SIECUS, I always forget the acronym. You have it written down?
It's the slogan is Sex Ed for Social Change.
Yes.
I'm actually not sure what the acronym is, which is odd, which I have looked for it. I won't lie.
Don't fret. We're going to have a reresource directory that you guys can look at.
SIECUS.
Yes, SIECUS. I think that's how you say it. But there is an interactive map on the SIECUS website, which we'll have resources all together if you guys want to look at it after. But it's an interactive map. When you hover over each state, it gives a rating, or a grade, actually, like a report card, a grade for how good the sex ed is, what grade that students need in order to meet that requirement for the state, and just whether or not the state even requires that there is sex ed. So, look for your state where you are. We're in California, and I'm grateful that we
Absolutely
now have laws that Constance can tell us about.
Yeah. So in 2016, the California Health Youth Act went into effect, which means that comprehensive sex education is required in all public schools. So material regarding human development and sexuality, including pregnancy, contraception, STDs, including HIV, is required. That still leaves some important things out.
Yeah, a lot of really important things, and I'd even argue the most important things, because you can know how things work, but you're not really taught what they're like or how you do them or what can happen or how you'll feel. I don't know, there's a lot.
You're not taught what yeah. The possibilities of how you'll feel should be more explored, but
the communication piece, I think, in the social aspects.
The communication and social aspects.
I think that's kind of what we're focusing on. Mm-hmm. More like they don't really teach you about your rights as an individual, let alone an individual that's disabled or with a disability. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're here to do, is to fill that missing link.
I think at this point I'm going to make the disclaimer that we will probably use person first language, where we say person with disabilities, and identity first language, where we say disabled person. Mm-hmm. Because we think both ways of saying that have merit.
Yes, and so it's a choice.
It's a choice, and we don't want to offend anyone in that choice.
May I make one more disclaimer?
Yeah.
Because I just thought about it.
I love a disclaimer.
It is a disclaimer. We are going to touch on certain aspects of sex, sexuality, that may not make us feel safe. Specifically, we will reference sexual violence. So if anyone who's listening has experienced or knows someone that has experienced sexual violence and doesn't feel comfortable or feel safe listening, we really encourage you to take a break. You can fast forward to a different part in the video, or if you're watching with somebody, if you want to step out, they can let you know when to come back in. We really want you to take care of yourself, but it is important to talk about sexual violence because people with developmental and intellectual disabilities and mental health conditions are at a higher risk of experiencing sexual violence. So, end of the disclaimer. Just wanted to say that.
So just to jump back, because California's law does mention youth with disabilities, in a 2024 paper by Lepore Stevens, it mentions that there are 36 states who do not include youth with disabilities in their sexuality education requirements at all. Mm-hmm. That's just, they're not mentioned.
Yes.
And I think that's an oversight and also like a bit of a trend.
It's the status quo for sure. Mm-hmm. Throughout history, disabled people have been left out of most of society. Yeah.
And I think we all watched the documentary Crip Camp.
Highly recommend it, by the way, if you haven't seen Crip Camp.
Yeah.
It's on YouTube for free.
It's on Netflix for a little money.
But I think the YouTube is free. I will say. Yes.
Free is better. I'm trying to remember what her name is. There's a woman who's featured with cerebral palsy. Mm-hmm. And
oh, yes, yeah.
She mentions that in her youth, right, she has chlamydia, and she has to go to the doctor multiple times to get it diagnosed because they don't test her for STDs. Mm-hmm. Because they don't even think to test her for STDs. They're like, you have cerebral palsy, you can't have an STD. Mm-hmm.
By the way, STD is a sexually transmitted disease.
It is indeed.
We're using a lot of acronyms. I'm going to try my best to make sure that I define them for those that don't know them.
And yes. Chlamydia is an STD that's, we're not here to discuss, right, either pregnancy or diseases or anything in detail, right? That's for a different, we're just starting conversations.
Yes. Don't fret, though. We have resources. I'm going to let Constance keep talking.
But, I mean, the good thing is that chlamydia, like, does not It is treatable.
Mm-hmm.
So she did get treatment. So that's the happy end of that story.
Yes, but the point, it's treatable if they know you have it.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue is disabled people have sex, but not everybody is proactive when it comes to keeping disabled people safe when they're having sex.
Mm-hmm.
I just remember like how shocked that the doctor was, and that like he couldn't believe it, and it was just multiple times that it was just, oh, it's maybe your appendix, or and like just always something else except for that.
Yeah.
Because it was just so out of his world.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's a lot of ableism. That's when, you know, people are discriminated against for having a disability. A lot of ableism shapes people's attitudes, how they feel about disabled people having sex. I think a lot of people don't understand what sex is like for people with different types of disabilities, and they may just assume that it doesn't happen, or that it can't happen, or that disabled people don't even want to have sex, which is far from the truth, and the research will tell you. We have research about it, by the way. And as a disabled person, I don't not want to have sex. Roundabout ways.
Thank you for letting us know.
Testament. Well, I mean, what? I mean, we're talking about it.
Indeed, we are.
I mean, we're human. Like,
Yeah.
that's our human nature.
Yeah. And it's dehumanizing to assume that people who have disabilities won't want to have sex.
It's dehumanizing to deny choice, or even that someone might want to make a choice. And other disclaimer too, not everybody wants to have sex, and we'll talk about that later as well. My first sex ed experience was in 6th grade. Watched a little dramatic video about a young girl getting her period at her friend's house, and her mom very, nicely provided her with a pad, and that was a happy ending. Cool. And then they gave us pads in a bag. I think it happened to you too, right, Monica?
Yeah, all I did get was a pad, but I would have loved the deodorant that the boys got. So.
Yeah, the boys got deodorant. That wasn't fair. They separated us. We got a pad in a bag.
Can't girls also sweat?
We do, but I guess they don't care if we stink.
Girls are allowed to stink.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
You can stink too if you want. Not you non-men out there.
I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, and my sex education was abstinence only. So yeah, they separated us into rooms with girls and boys, and they made a list on the board. They said, what do you all want in a boyfriend? And they made a list on the board. Or and what do you want in a husband? And talk about things like how tall you want him to be, or whatever.
There's
First
a
of
lot of
all,
layers there, yeah.
incredibly heteronormative, 100%. But then I remember they told us, well, the lists that the boys are writing in the other room for girlfriend and wife are completely different, because in a girlfriend the boys want all these things, but in a wife they want totally different things. So
it's a whole other phenomenon in of itself.
You just better keep yourself to yourself, or you're gonna be stuck in the girlfriend category.
My first time in a sex ed class was in 5th grade. They separated us. The girls got pads, the boys got deodorant, and then sometimes 7th or 8th grade, the main thing was just about how to put a condom on a banana.
I didn't get to do that.
It was very funny at that age. It was actually so hilarious, and I know she did not like that job. She was very upset. And then for my senior year, we talked a little bit about it, but then we went straight into talking about drugs. But there was never any connection, which there could have been. But
Yeah.
being gay, and I never made this realization until now that it's never talked about. The norm is always boy and girl being together, and that's the only type of sex that is being taught, when there's a million other things to get into, and that just goes to show how much they're not teaching, and it bringing it back to how they're not properly teaching students with disabilities the right education when it comes to sex.
Can I say one last thing though?
I don't think it'll be the last thing you say, Christine, but you can say it.
I always say that, but only because I don't know if our listeners
I
here.
wanted that to be a joke. I want to be clear to Christine and the audience that was a joke.
I'm a yapper.
And
she
that
knows me.
I'm teasing her, and that there's supposed to be like a like a giggle after that.
We'll fix it in post. We'll add the sound effects later. But real quick, because this is important. Heterosexual means a cis man, which means a person who was assigned male at birth, has the genitalia and sex organs of what we consider a male, like doctors consider a male. Mm-hmm. And then a cis woman, which is a person who is identified as female that has the genitals and sexual organs associated with females by doctors. But there are also different other types of sex, by the way, intersex combination. We'll provide resources on this too, because we're not going to get a biology lesson here.
Yeah.
But I'm only defining certain things. So heterosexuality, cis man, cis woman in a relationship. Homosexuality is a person of the same gender in a relationship. But there's other types of sexualities too. And we can maybe talk about that later if it comes up.
We're very supportive of it.
Yeah.
We're pro.
Yeah. I mean, I'm queer. It's okay. You guys can be queer too.
Yeah, I'm pretty gay.
Yeah.
So.
Yay!
Yeah.
We love the gays out here. I don't know if we'll have to edit that in post.
I don't think we'll have to edit in post.
I can say
I've always wanted to be gay, but it just didn't work out.
And that's important too.
Yeah.
Sexuality is not a choice. You just are attracted to whoever you are.
Yeah. Just like a little bald spot, you know? And
Yeah. I'm autistic and have ADHD. I think that's plays a role in this. Has to do with the sex ed that I think I needed and didn't get. But I think my parents noticed that I was different and assumed that I didn't need a sex talk, which is part of the problem that we're talking about today. So, yeah, some youth out there are not being talked to by their parents. They may not get good sex ed in school. Maybe their friends introduce them to porn. Maybe their friends are not talking about sex at all.
Porn is on the internet, and it's not based on real sex. And it's videos people make to make money, and it's not bad. It's not evil, but it's not a good place to gain information.
It shouldn't be the only place you learn about sex, because there's a lot more to know about sex. We also learn about it in movies, shows. I think the big part of it, though, is the movies and the shows don't always show consent happening before sex or sexual acts happen, or even just kissing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just super unrealistic, and when you start learning about stuff like that, if you have questions, you want someone who's knowledgeable enough to answer that.
I was reading about different programs that are specifically designed to be taught to youth with cognitive and intellectual disabilities and developmental disabilities. And a lot of them used web-based educational activities and videos and text-to-speech, just a lot of different tech involved. And some of it is just because it's easier to remember. Grove et al. Was talking about the need for these universal design for living methods that you can use to teach about. And then, also, I was reading a qualitative study, Lofgren Martinson. This is from 2012. And so this qualitative study just means they gather information. So they just talk to a bunch of different people, young people, And this is in Sweden. So they have different kinds of sex ed than we do. It's a little, I would say it's a little bit better, a little more comprehensive. And they were just talking about like how watching videos though and like watching TV and movies, sometimes it can teach you important things. And this specific young woman mentioned, she doesn't mention the name of it, but I will. She watches Teen Mom and she's like, I learned a lot. Condoms can break. I don't know if everyone remembers Teen Mom.
Oh yeah, my mom watched she still watches Teen Mom right now. Like,
Is it on?
Yeah, they follow up. But continue.
How old are the children now?
There's reunions.
My goodness. So Teen Mom was a show that aired on MTV how many years ago?
Well, it was 16 and pregnant first.
I see.
Yes.
And then it was Teen Mom. So it was just basically...
Okay, even Monica knows. I'm not too old. This is good.
I know.
Yeah.
This is good. People know about 16 and pregnant and Teen Mom.
It was just a reality show about, 16-year-old girls that get pregnant. And I think it was supposed to kind of just show you the realities of what can happen if you have sex and, may or may not use contraceptives or birth control, which prevents pregnancy.
Yeah. But some contraceptives can fail.
Yes, they can fail. Yeah.
And I don't know. I think that really struck me because, it is like a reality show, and in a lot of ways it's very dramatic and, like played up a little bit. But that did sort of show her like how difficult having a baby was.
I'm remembering that show, My Secret Life as an American Teenager.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and she has sex one time and gets pregnant.
And that can happen.
Yes, that is total, and that might be what happens if you are not aware of the sex education and what you need to do to take care of yourself and prevent teenage pregnancy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that show was very cringe, but it was like they covered a lot of things within there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes, network TV coming in for the win. I actually don't believe either of those. I think those were both cable shows, but...
Yes, but we will say, I guess maybe the point that we're illustrating is in this study, there was a participant, was it a person with an intellectual disability?
Yes, it was a young woman, 17 years old. So
she essentially is illustrating, the way that she learned about pregnancy and birth control was just watching it on TV, a reality TV show about young parents, which isn't a bad place to learn about things, but there needs to be more than that. And there needs to be a back and forth, which is, again, why we're here. There's actually this cool game, interactive game on, what's the website called?
We're going to include links.
We'll include links,
but the website is yoursexualhealthtoolkit.com.
Yes, and it has an interactive game. It teaches you different things about sex education, including sexuality, relationships, consent, STDs, pregnancy prevention, etc. And there's a glossary that defines, some of the things we talked about here or other things having to do with your body or sex behaviors that you can look at with your parents or, at your own pace. And it's really informative, a resource that you can keep accessing. But that might be a better way that you learn about this. All I'm saying is there are a lot of resources out there.
Planned Parenthood is a national organization that has a ton of resources. Last time I went, it was a sliding scale. Anybody? Affordable.
Planned Parenthood has never taken my money, but shout out to Planned Parenthood. By the way, you can go there for a bunch of different stuff. We'll have links.
I think you mentioned a specific...
Yep. Planned Parenthood is
curriculum.
One of the organizations that can provide support in this area because they have, I believe it's like a 6-week curriculum that's led by a health educator according to the website that's out here in San Bernardino, and it's called Equal Voices, and it's a comprehensive sex education adapted to meet the needs and levels of understandings of the people participating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. See,
I think the ARC also has multiple locations, but I know there's one in LA, at least one in LA, and they specifically serve individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and they have a lot of resources as well, including about sex ed. I'm so sorry, I interrupted you.
You did? Oh, it's okay. I can still say stuff. I got stuff to say. So, this was a research study conducted by Slofine et al., 2019. I'm so sorry if I'm butchering your name, person who did this research study. But like I said, they gathered information from adults that have intellectual disabilities about their physical intimacy and sex. But here's a quote from a woman. She's 39 years old. She says, why isn't there a booklet about what's normal and what's not? I don't know that sex with my brother wasn't normal. Later, I heard that it's not normal, that you don't do that with your brother, but how could I know? How is it supposed to be? And how it doesn't belong? I would like to know about sex and what's up with sex and what you should do and don't. I'd like to know that and accept your own body. And I think it's very important. I'm having trouble with that. I find it difficult. So I think this transitions us into another really important topic that isn't often included in sexual education, is the relational aspect of sex and just relationships in general. This woman specifically had talked about not being told about differences between relationships with family or, relationships with friends or people that they might be in a romantic relationship where sex would be appropriate, or friends, whatever. It's as long as there's consent and that's agreed upon by both parties. But essentially what I'm saying is that different relationships have different expectations and things that are safe and acceptable to people in those relationships, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, consent is a huge like puzzle piece that is not really discussed as often as it should be, and is like particularly important to those who have cognitive disabilities. It's just really important to know what your rights are and, learn about your own boundaries and about how to protect them, and that people aren't allowed to cross them because they're yours.
We have a student who is on the spectrum of autism, and today it was reported to us that he has been touching another student after she's made it very clear that she doesn't want this and she would prefer her space, and he just keeps doing the same behavior. Mm-hmm. And we're now going to be navigating on how to teach him consent, personal space, boundaries, and other things like that. But our main goal is also to prepare them that they need to get these social skills. I don't know if that's what you would call it.
Yeah, I think so.
And learn more about consent, because that's really going to affect them as they go out into life, and that could end up in a serious charge or something like that and ruin their life forever. So that's why they need the education and the learning experience now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would argue too that it's social skills 100%, but also emotional regulation skills. Mm-hmm. I will say, as a person who's autistic, and it's a spectrum, and other things, a big part of what impacts me with autism and ADHD is called executive dysfunction, and that's basically the front part of your brain helps you make choices. It helps you communicate, think critically, and when you don't feel safe and your body thinks that it's scared and might be in danger, the front part of your brain shuts off, and that can sometimes play a role in certain choices that we make. So there may be times when we don't feel safe and we may not be able to make appropriate choices, but there are things that we can learn to calm down our bodies and to maybe know when we need to go to a place that feels safer, or identify people who help us feel safe so that we can make better choices. Sometimes protecting ourselves, the social skill may involve getting support from an advocate. If you have a service provider or a parent who supports you with different things throughout your life, depending on your support needs, they can play a big role in keeping you safe and helping you navigate consent and things like that.
This individual, young woman, has anxiety and ADHD. And she, what she shared with me was really, or what she shared with the interviewer was very interesting. With my combined anxiety and ADHD, I think there was a part of being scared to ask questions, and then a part of not really being observant enough about, I don't know, just not putting enough focus on the sex education that I did receive, the little sex education that I did receive. It's kind of depressing, but I feel like with my anxiety, I kind of struggle to speak up when maybe I didn't have any interest in a guy. Like if he's touching me or something, I don't like, and like I just run off or take off and not handle that in a correct way, where maybe somebody else could have handled it differently, because they would have said, screw you, or something like that. And I'm just like, oh God, what do I do? Yeah, and I have generalized anxiety disorder, and I really relate to this, idea of, bolting, right? Just, it's fight or flight, 100%. Always. And yeah, I think when you haven't thought about those things and you haven't considered how you're going to handle them or what you are interested in. So I think a lot of what we're talking about is getting to know yourself.
Yeah. Yes. Getting to know yourself, getting to know what you need, getting to know what you want. And also, Constance brings something up. It reminds me of what helps me when I'm scared. Y'all ever heard of scripting?
Do you write a script in your head?
Basically.
About what's going to happen?
Is it role playing almost, but more with yourself?
Yeah, kind of. I know that there's certain interventions, listeners out there might implement them, or you might have taken part in social stories, things like that, where you can maybe think of a scenario or a situation that you might be in where maybe you've run off before because you didn't know what choice to make in that moment, but you could think about what might happen and maybe write down what you could say to somebody so that you can communicate what you need to when you're scared. Say, for example, I might make a script if this boy comes up to me and wants to kiss me, and I don't want him to kiss me, but I freeze up and I get scared. If I studied my script and say, no, I don't want to kiss you, that makes me feel unsafe. Please don't touch me. Or something like that. Simple phrases that you practice beforehand, or maybe you can practice this with someone you trust, like a parent or a friend or an adult, and maybe they can teach you some other ways that you can protect, communicate your boundaries or your needs or things like that. That's just one example, but essentially thinking ahead about what situations you might be in. And then parents too, you can help your children or teachers too think about these different situations they might be in, so they don't find themselves in those situations not knowing what to do.
The Centers for Independent Living have some YouTube videos also that have some really good education about this, because I think we should also think about this from the perspective of the young man who's approaching women and being inappropriate, because we need to teach him skills, how to walk up and say, hey, do you want to kiss or whatever, or do you want to hold my hand,
or can I touch you?
I like you, how to ask those kinds of questions, and maybe how to write scripts about them, and practice those skills. And then, like, you know, everybody can have a good time. Sex is fun, you guys.
I did want to add from this article, because it was based off of a research study done in South Africa following educators and how they would start to implement like sex education for students with disabilities. But the results were actually interesting because it says it does matter on how much they are trained to do it. So it's not just like putting the teachers out there and like, hey, now you have to start. And I like backtracking, I think that is the problem, that it's just generalized for everybody and it's not really targeted to students with disabilities. So that's why there needs to be like things put in place, like trainings and other things, like to get the educators like ready to implement this when it's time.
Yeah, absolutely. And now that you bring up that intervention, I actually read 2 other studies that were a community based program, but instead of having teachers facilitate the intervention, it was actually peers. And the reason why I think it's important to talk about how valuable peers could be in talking about things like sex or relationships is that people may feel more comfortable talking to someone that has a similar experience. I mean, this in of itself is kind of a peer model. I see some of you as my peers. You know, we share similar experiences, needs, and differences and things like that. But the 2 studies, one was done in Saskatchewan, Canada, and the other one was in Australia. Their peer models showed that the students not only gained more knowledge about sex relationships and what they want out of those things, but also had a more meaningful learning experience. And what I mean by that is they didn't just memorize a list of definitions or they didn't just watch a video. They talked and they made sense of it in their own minds and in their own lives. And they were able to take that knowledge and apply it after the class. I think it's pretty cool. Shout out to peer models.
Yeah.
What I've noticed in the research that we've done is knowing about your rights. Constance did talk about this, about your rights as a human being, as a person with a disability or a disabled person. Knowing them and being able to have the skills and the resources and the support to have them secured is really important. And we have rights to lots of things. We have rights to safety. We have rights to have sex if we want to. We have rights to not have sex if we want to. We have rights to love who we want to. But we live in a world where that's not the reality a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But
we are very happy to live in California. Where we still have access to abortion and contraceptives and, you know, whatever else they're going to take away from us next. Gender affirming care. Big shout out to gender affirming care.
Shout out to our trans brothers and sisters.
And
non-binary folk, too.
Gender's a construct. On the governmental side, the Administration for Children and Families and the Family and Youth Services Bureau have information about your rights and different ways to improve your health.
Yeah, and take charge of your sexual and reproductive health.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take charge.
Yeah.
It is your life.
We got to be informed, everyone. What is informed consent? That means that you have all the knowledge you need to make the best choice that you can. And that has to do with sex. For example, you want to have sex with somebody, they may have an STD. And if they don't tell you about that and you have sex with them, there's a likelihood that you might contract an STD.
Yeah.
That means that you were not informed, and that means that you did not have informed consent to that sex act because they didn't tell you that really important information that you need in order to make a choice. You can talk about it with someone else.
You can talk about it with whoever you want to, if they're willing to talk about it with you.
Yes.
But Planned Parenthood is willing to talk about it. So.
Yeah, and the resources we'll be
Give them a
sharing with
shout
you.
All right.
All right, sick. Yeah.